The silver cutlery gleamed under the chandelier's golden light. At Le Jardin, the most exclusive rooftop restaurant in Manhattan, power was currency and silence was reverence. Joshua Whitmore, billionaire, venture capitalist, and a man unaccustomed to failure, sat at the head of a long marble table. The view behind him, Central Park, glowing under the twilight, meant nothing right now. All he saw were numbers. His fingers danced across the screen of his tablet, dismissing graphs, swiping away charts. The merger was unraveling. The South Korean tech company had pulled out unexpectedly. Billions, gone in the space of a single clause. He closed his eyes, exhaled through his nose. He hated inefficiency. He hated noise. And tonight, everything felt off. The waiter approached silently. Elijah, 26, new to this job, but not new to pressure. He moved like someone who had learned to avoid drawing attention. Slim, tall, dressed in the tailored black uniform of Le Jardin, he carried a silver pitcher and a stillness born of long nights spent trying not to make mistakes. Joshua didn't look up. He waved a dismissive hand as Elijah reached for the water glasses. But the pitcher's spout caught the rim of a crystal goblet. It tipped. The sound of trickling water was deafening in the quiet. A stream ran onto the snowy white tablecloth, perfectly folded, pressed, imported from Italy. The water spread toward Joshua's phone. He flinched, grabbed the device, and stood up in one fluid motion. The scrape of his chair echoed. "You have any idea," Joshua said, voice low and sharp, "how much this tablecloth costs?" Every conversation in the restaurant paused. Forks hung midair. Every eye turned to the scene at table 7. Elijah's mouth opened, closed. He bent quickly with a napkin, blotting the cloth, his hand steady, but his breath shallow. "I'm sorry, sir," he murmured. "Sorry," Joshua said louder, stepping away from the table, wiping at his pants, though they were untouched. "You spill water at a business dinner worth more than your life savings, and you say, 'Sorry?'" Elijah looked down. His eyes, deep brown, lined with exhaustion, did not meet the billionaire's. You can't even serve a damn glass of water correctly," Joshua snapped, his voice cracking with the rage of a day gone terribly wrong. "Do you know who you're serving right now? Do you have any idea who I am?" "I do," Elijah said quietly. "I'm truly—" "Save it." Joshua's hand sliced the air. "You people always think an apology wipes the slate clean." And then he saw it. Joshua's eyes dropped mid-sentence, catching the movement of Elijah's wrist as he turned slightly to blot the spill. There, just above the cuff of his sleeve, was a tattoo. The ink was faded, done in what looked like a child's handwriting, scrawled across the skin like a fragile prayer. "Keep going, Dad. For me." Everything stopped. The words hit Joshua like a body blow. His throat clenched unexpectedly. The fire in his chest, the anger, the frustration, crackled and went cold. "What's—" he began, then paused. "What's that on your wrist?" Elijah looked up, startled. His hand instinctively pulled the sleeve lower, but it was too late. "That?" His voice was barely audible. "That was from my son. He wrote it on a card the night before he passed." A stillness gripped the table. Even the ambient music from the speakers seemed to fade. Joshua blinked. "Your son?" "Leukemia." Elijah's voice was steady now, but the words trembled with memory. "He was 6. I worked 3 jobs to keep the treatment going. Nights here, days at the garage. Didn't sleep much. Didn't eat much either. He glanced at the tattoo. He saw me one morning, half asleep on the kitchen floor. Thought I was giving up. Next day, I found that note. Said he didn't want me to stop fighting. A silence so thick it felt like a blanket settled over the restaurant. Joshua's mouth opened, then closed. He was no longer in Le Jardin. He was 12 again, standing in a sterile hospital hallway, holding the cold hand of a boy no older than Elijah's son. His brother, Caleb. He had failed him. That memory, buried beneath success and strategy and spreadsheets, rose like a tide. When he finally spoke, Joshua's voice was different. "I'm sorry," he said, and this time he meant it. Elijah didn't respond. He didn't need to. Later, after the dinner ended awkwardly and Joshua's business partners left in quiet murmurs, the billionaire found Elijah near the service elevator. He held out a hand. "What's your name?" "Elijah, sir." Joshua nodded, then smiled. Small, tentative. "You're not here because you're a waiter, Elijah. You're here because you're a fighter." Elijah didn't smile, but something softened in his eyes. Joshua turned to go, then paused. "Wait," he said. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out a sleek business card. On the back, scrawled in his own hand, "You deserve more. J.W." 1 week later, Elijah received a letter in the mail. "Your education has been fully funded. The Whitmore Foundation believes in second chances, and in those who earn them." Inside the box was a gold bracelet. The inscription, etched in delicate script, "Keep going, Dad. For me." 2 weeks had passed since the night that should have ruined everything, and somehow changed everything instead. Elijah sat in the tiny apartment he shared with his cousin in Harlem, the gold bracelet resting gently on his wrist. It glinted in the early morning light. The script, engraved with surgical precision, had already begun to fade in one place, not because of wear, but because Elijah touched it constantly, reflexively, reverently. He still couldn't believe it was real. The card had come in an envelope with the Whitmore Foundation seal. The accompanying letter was brief, clinical even. A full scholarship to NYU's School of Business, all expenses paid. No interviews, no forms. Just a signed note from Joshua Whitmore himself. "Your son gave you strength. Let us help you with direction. J.W." Elijah folded the letter again, the edges soft from repeated handling. The ink was smudged in places, some from the printing, some from tears he would never admit to anyone. The scholarship wasn't the miracle. The miracle was that someone like Joshua Whitmore had seen him. Not just the uniform, not just the mistake, but the man inside, the father, the fighter. Elijah tucked the letter back into his drawer, next to the toy fire truck that once belonged to Isaiah, the one he refused to throw away. As he packed his work uniform for what would be one of his last shifts, his cousin Darius walked in, rubbing his eyes. "You going in again? Thought you were done." Elijah smiled. "I told them I'd finish the week. Can't just walk out. That place kept me afloat." Darius nodded, reaching for a box of cereal. "You really gonna do this school thing?" "Yeah," Elijah said quietly. "I think I'm allowed to try now." The ride downtown was unremarkable. The subway was late. A man in a faded Knicks jersey nodded off on Elijah's shoulder, mumbling something about rent. The city moved on, as it always did, indifferent to any one man's story. But Elijah felt different, as if his world, so long in survival mode, had tilted slightly toward possibility. When he arrived at Le Jardin, the staff greeted him with awkward warmth. The maitre d', who'd barely spoken to him before, nodded respectfully. Word had spread. The billionaire, the tattoo, the bracelet. A new myth had been born, the kind that whispered through marble hallways and slipped between clinking glasses. "Elijah," one of the chefs said during prep, slicing truffles with precision, "that guy, Whitmore, he really paid for school?" Elijah just smiled. "Yeah." "Damn," the chef muttered. "Didn't think he had it in him." Neither did I, Elijah thought. At the end of the night, as he was folding napkins one last time in the quiet back room, his manager approached. "There's someone here for you." Elijah looked up, confused. "Customer?" The manager shrugged. "Not exactly." Said he's a friend. When Elijah walked to the back exit, he found a man in his mid-40s leaning against a silver car. Not Whitmore. Different. Older suit, weary face, briefcase at his side. "You Elijah Thomas?" "Yes." The man extended a hand. "Morris Lane. I work with the Whitmore Foundation." Elijah shook it cautiously. "I'm not here to sell you anything," Lane said with a small smile. "I'm here to ask you something." Elijah folded his arms. "Okay." Lane gestured to the car. "Take a ride with me?" Instinct said no. Everything else said, just go. See where it leads. They drove in silence for several blocks until the lights of downtown gave way to the quieter streets near Tribeca. "I worked for Joshua's brother," Lane finally said. "Caleb." Elijah's ears perked up. "He died young." "Cancer," Lane added softly. "Like your son. But before he passed, Caleb had a dream. He wanted to build something, a place where kids from tough homes could learn, grow. He called it the Cornerstone Project. But after his death, the idea got buried." Elijah glanced at Lane. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Joshua never let it go. Not really. And because he thinks you might be the one to revive it." Elijah blinked. "Me?" Lane pulled the car to the curb. Outside, a small brick building stood wedged between two towers. The windows were boarded up, the paint flaking. A forgotten place in the middle of everything. "This is it," Lane said. "It's nothing now, but it could be something." They got out. The air was cool, the city quieter here. Lane handed Elijah a folder. Inside were blueprints, permits, a name already typed on the header, Director Elijah Thomas. Elijah laughed out loud, disbelieving. "I'm a waiter." "You're a father," Lane corrected. "You're a fighter, and apparently you've got a billionaire's attention. Use it." Elijah ran a hand through his hair. "I don't know anything about running a school." Lane nodded. Neither did Caleb. He was 16 when he drafted the plan. But dreams don't wait for qualifications. They stood in silence. Elijah looked up at the crumbling facade. In his mind, he saw Isaiah standing in front of it, bright-eyed, healthy, holding a backpack too big for his tiny shoulders. "Is this for kids like him?" Elijah asked. "Yes," Lane said. "Kids like him, and kids like you, when you were his age." Elijah didn't reply. He just kept staring at the building. That night, as he walked home, Elijah thought about his son's laugh. The way Isaiah used to whisper, "You got this, Daddy," before a double shift. And then he thought about the words on his wrist. "Keep going, Dad. For me." By the time Elijah reached his apartment, he had made a decision. He picked up his phone. "Mr. Whitmore," he said when the call was answered. Joshua's voice was warm. "Elijah." "I hoped you'd call." "I've seen the building," Elijah said. "If I'm going to do this, I want to do it right." There was a pause. "Then we'll do it right," Joshua said. "Together." 6 months later, the building no one looked at had become the place no one could ignore. The Cornerstone Youth Initiative opened its doors on an overcast Tuesday in September. Gray skies threatened rain, but nothing could dampen the energy buzzing through the courtyard. Balloons lined the front gates. A mural, commissioned by local artists, now covered the once cracked exterior, depicting children of all colors and backgrounds climbing upward, hand in hand, toward a golden sky. Inside, the hallway smelled like fresh paint and new beginnings. Elijah stood by the glass doors, tie crooked, sweat collecting at his collar. He hadn't slept much. He hadn't needed to. His nerves were electric. Behind him, staff moved with first-day jitters. Volunteers from NYU, former foster parents, teachers from the neighborhood, all gathered because they believed in the dream of one man who spilled water on the wrong table at the right time. Outside, news vans lined the block. The story had already made headlines. From waiter to director, Elijah Thomas opened school for kids who need a second chance. Elijah didn't care about the headlines. He cared about the boy stepping through the gate, nervously holding his mother's hand, the girl adjusting her oversized hoodie, eyes darting, unsure if this place would be like all the others, and the teenager standing alone, backpack worn thin, looking like he might bolt at any second. These were his people. They were why he said yes. Joshua Whitmore arrived last, of course, in a plain navy suit, no press entourage, no tie. He kept his distance, standing beside a lamppost, watching Elijah in silence. Elijah noticed. He nodded once. Joshua nodded back. That was all they needed. Later that afternoon, Elijah stood in the center of the main atrium, facing 50 students and a dozen parents who had stayed behind. Behind him, the gold plaque read, "The Cornerstone Initiative, in honor of Isaiah Thomas and Caleb Whitmore." He cleared his throat. "I was going to prepare a speech," he began, "but then I realized the truth doesn't need polish." The room quieted. "I'm not a principal. I'm not a CEO. I'm just a dad," he continued. "A dad who once lost his son and nearly lost himself. I worked jobs that broke my back and drained my hope. And then someone reminded me that even broken things still have value." He glanced toward the bracelet on his wrist. "And so do broken people." A few parents shifted. One mother wiped her cheek. "This building, this program, it's not just a place to study, it's a place to remember that you're more than where you come from, that you can mess up and still move forward, that a mistake doesn't define you, but what you do after it might." He paused. This place was built by grief and by grace. Then softer. It was built because of a little boy who believed in me, even when I didn't. The silence that followed was not empty. It was sacred. That night, after everyone had gone home and the halls were finally quiet, Elijah walked through the rooms one last time. In classroom 2B, crayons still rolled on desks. In the cafeteria, a sticky spot of juice reminded him of Isaiah's eternal messes. In the staff lounge, a single photo hung, a black and white image of a young Caleb Whitmore, grinning with a hammer in his hand. Blueprint rolled under one arm. Joshua appeared in the doorway. "You stayed late," he said. Elijah smiled. "You too." They stood in silence. Then Joshua asked, "Did you ever imagine this would happen?" Elijah shook his head. "Not in this lifetime." Joshua stepped closer. "Can I show you something?" He handed Elijah an envelope. Inside, an old photo, one Elijah had never seen before. It was a grainy snapshot of a hospital room. A young Joshua, perhaps 14, sat beside his brother's bed. Caleb was smiling, holding a notepad. On it were the words, hastily scribbled, "Don't stop. Make it count." On the back of the photo, a post-it note, Joshua's handwriting. "He believed in me. I didn't, until I saw you." Elijah looked up, stunned. "I thought money would fix everything," Joshua said. "But Caleb didn't ask for money. He asked for meaning." A pause. "And I think you gave it to him and to me." Elijah looked at the photo one more time, then folded it carefully and slid it into his pocket. "Let's make sure this place doesn't forget him," he said. "Or Isaiah," Joshua added. They stood there a moment longer. Two men, once strangers, now bound by the echoes of those they'd loved and lost. Months passed. The Cornerstone became more than a school. It became a movement. Enrollment doubled. The mentorship program expanded. Elijah was invited to speak at universities, foundations, education summits. But he always returned by nightfall, because no keynote mattered more than the late shifts in the library, the quiet check-ins with students wrestling their own ghosts. One winter morning, Elijah received a letter in the mail. It was scrawled in messy pencil, no return address. "Mr. Thomas, I wanted to thank you. My brother comes home and says this is the first time he feels seen. You don't talk down to us. You just listen. That's rare. I know I'm just a kid. But I think you're the kind of person my mom says the world needs more of. Keep going, Mr. Thomas. For us." There was no name, just the words. Elijah sat for a long time after reading it. Then he looked at the bracelet on his wrist. His fingers brushed the engraving. He smiled. He stood up. And he kept going.